So if you've clicked on this video, I'm going to assume that you're a spiritually interested person, perhaps a spiritual seeker, perhaps you meditate, and you're trying to understand why all the spiritual teachers are telling you that you need to not become entrenched in life and that you shouldn't be so attached to life. And perhaps you're trying to understand why that is, because from your point of view, you're thinking, well, I'm here to experience life and I'm experiencing life and I love my family and I love food and I love going on holiday. What's wrong with that? And how can I combine my spiritual interest with the life that I'm leading now, or should I? So the first thing that I want to point out to you is that the family that you've got now, as permanent as they feel, sadly, and this is a sad truth, is they are temporary, because everything in this existence is temporary. One day, whether it's in a week's time or whether it's in 50 years' time or 60 years' time, you will leave this planet or your family will leave before you. And perhaps you'll meet them on the other side, but when you reincarnate again, if you do reincarnate again, you'll have no memory of them. And that is very hard to accept, and I don't want to scaremonger you or anything like that. I'm just trying to outline the truth as far as I believe it to be. Because you have no recollection of previous families, previous kids, previous mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, anyone that you've been related to in a previous life, of which, by the way, you've probably had many previous lives if you're interested spiritually, and if you're watching a video like this, you wouldn't be coming across this video and you wouldn't have this interest if you hadn't been here many, many times. Because the whole reason we're here is to experience life. But at some point in that curve, we have to start returning to where we've come from. And if you're at the point where you're spiritually interested, you're on that curve at some point, to some extent or another. So you're trying to understand now who you really are and where you've come from and what the truth is to all of this. So our family is temporary, and we've probably had many, many different families in our lives that we no longer have any recollection of, and they no longer have any recollection of us. But we place so much importance on them in this lifetime. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just pointing out what we do. But I think for me, the acceptance needs to be there that as beautiful as it is to have a husband or a wife and kids, and as okay as it is, I'm not saying you shouldn't either, we have to be willing to accept that we will need to move on one day, and that they are temporary, and that they're not our eternal family. You know, they're not. One day we're not going to know who they are, and they're not going to know who we are. We're going to have forgotten one another. You know, that happens every night when you go to sleep. When you go into a deep sleep, you have no recollection of them, and they have no recollection of you. So with that truth being said, if you were to see your lifetimes over the course of 2,000 years, and you were to see how many different families and relatives and stuff you've had, and all of us, by the way, I'm explaining this to myself in a sense, we would realise how daft it is to place so much importance on this life and who we meet and that type of thing. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't love them fully. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't enjoy and love our time with them. But it does mean that we should be of the understanding that one day we're going to have to move on from them, and that they're not our eternal family. And with that knowing, it should be combined, in my opinion, with the knowing that the divine is the eternal. It's where we've come from, it's who we really are. Yet we give no importance often, and very little time, to that eternal part of us. And the reason that spiritual teachers talk so much about not being so entrenched in life is because they're trying to point out, although they don't always explain it, that life is temporary, and that the more entrenched you become and the more attached you become, the harder it is to leave, the more you suffer when everything goes. As soon as you become attached to something, as it will need to leave one day, you will then suffer. And you also forget the truth that there is an eternal part of you, and you forget that truth because you become so entrenched in the temporary life. And the way that I often like to describe this is in the form of us playing the role of an actor. As human beings, we've become so good at the role of playing this act as a human being that we've forgotten who we really are. We've forgotten that we're actually divine beings, and we've come from the divine, and we're actually one with the divine at all times, so always have been. But we've totally forgotten that because we've become so attached and absorbed and consumed in this temporary existence that comes and goes. So this is one of the reasons why spiritual teachers talk about the importance of not being so attached to life. But what I do want to add to that is that it does not mean that you shouldn't enjoy life. You should enjoy life. You should absolutely adore, I absolutely adore my morning coffee. I love waking up in the morning and smelling the fresh air. I love the sea. I love nature. But I'm not attached to those things nowhere near as much as I used to be. I'm sure there's some attachment because I'm a human being and I'm a work in progress. But I've tried and worked at, and I feel like I've improved and become better at not being so attached to those things. And that's really what we're all working towards doing. And that's what many teachers are trying to explain to you, is that be in the world, as Jesus said, be in the world, but not of the world. Be in the world, enjoy your coffee, love your friends, love your family, but know that they're temporary, and have your mind on the divine. I think that Sai Baba says, hands in society, head in the forest. And what he means really is, hands in the world, be busy, help people, serve, but in your mind, be thinking of God. Remind yourself of the divine. Remind yourself of who you really are. And my teacher once said to me, he said, Ben, all I'm really trying to do, all I'm really trying to get you to do is give yourself back to yourself. And it was so clear to me then that the whole spiritual path is not one of finding something that's separate to you now. It's one of finding who you really are, the part of you that has always been you. But we, as I was touching upon a second ago, have become so good at the role of being an actor that we've forgotten who we were before we took on this role. And all of the meditation, all of the remembering God, all of the praying, all of the offering everything up to the divine is truthfully to start this transition from, I believe, and this is not me, but just generally speaking as human beings, I am so wrapped up in the illusion that I'm this physical being, and I've got to now consciously remember the divine and think of the divine a lot and meditate and do all of these things so that I can transition back over to realizing the truth of who I actually am, which is infinite divine light, which is what we all are. So without cluttering this video and confusing you, I'm going to leave it at that, and hopefully this gives you more clarity on what the spiritual journey is about. And if you're a person that was confused about this topic, hopefully you've now got more clarity. If you're wanting to learn more about meditation and be part of an online school, then I'll leave a link in the description below. Feel free to check it out. There's an amazing group of people in there. You'll learn tons. And yeah, failing that, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks a lot.